Transportation Authority of Marin for June 22nd to order, and welcome everyone for being here tonight. As we continue to comply with the state and local shelter-in-place orders, and as allowed by Governor Newsom's executive order, which is 929-20, the TAM board meeting is physically closed to the public, and the meeting is being held virtually via Zoom. I'm Judy Arnold and the chair of TAM, and I want to thank my fellow commissioners, Ann Richmond, TAM's executive director, and her staff, and their attendance by either video or phone. I also want to thank members of the public who have also tuned in to the meeting this evening. In order to ensure that we have a quorum of the board, I'll ask Denise to conduct a roll call of our commission. So everyone put it off mute. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Arnold. Okay, here we go. Chair Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Campbell.
Present.
Commissioner Carmel.
Here.
Commissioner Cleveland Knowles.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Present.
Commissioner Connolly. Commissioner Eckler. Commissioner Fredericks.
Here.
Commissioner Haroff.
Here.
Commissioner Lee.
It looks like Commissioner Lee is in the attendee area, so
Oh.
maybe we can take care of that in a minute.
I will do that. Let me finish the roll call, then I'll see if I can get him in. Let's see, Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Rice. Commissioner Rodoni.
Here.
Commissioner Spears.
Here.
All right, and if you'll bear with me just a moment, let me see if I can get, here we go. Okay. Commissioner Lee, are you with us?
I am. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. So let me just go a little further in making some announcements to the public. Public participation remains of utmost importance during these difficult times. And we did provide instructions at the top of this afternoon's agenda so that anyone who would like to watch the meeting may do so. Also on the posted agenda is a way for you, the public, to provide comments on today's agenda items. You are invited to do that by sending your comment in an email to info@tam.ca.gov. If your comment is received before the item is heard, it will be read when the specific agenda item is being considered by the committee and will become part of the record. If it is received during the meeting, but after an item is heard, it will not be read, but will become part of the record. In order to ensure staff receives this comment during the meeting, it is recommended that you send your comment to info@tam.ca.gov early in the meeting. Note that there is a 3-minute limit per comment. For those of you watching the meetings on your electronic device, you may provide verbal comment at any time during the open time for that particular item. If you do so, please touch the raised hand the raised hand feature, and wait for the clerk to call your name and unmute you. If you are participating by phone, raise your hand on Zoom by pressing star 9, and wait to be called upon by the clerk to speak. You will be notified that your device has been unmuted when it is your turn to speak. You may be notified prior to your allotted time being over. Your comments will also become part of the public record. Ensure that you are in a quiet environment with no background noise. Before we go on, I'm going to ask the commissioners and staff to mute their microphones, if possible, for the duration of this meeting and only unmuted when speaking. This will help minimize the feedback and background noise and allow staff to give a clear, audible presentation. Please keep in mind that the clerk will conduct a roll call on each action item, so you will need to unmute your microphone briefly. Then I'm wondering, do we have Pat Eklund here yet?
Chair, it doesn't look like she's arrived yet.
Okay, so if she comes in, let me know, and then we'll go back and welcome her and swear her in for tonight. And so, then we have, okay, so we're ready then. Do we have anyone else to swear in, Executive Director? No.
We do not.
All right. I do not have a chair's report tonight, so we're going to go to Commissioner Matters. This is for items not on the agenda. Do any of the commissioners have any issues or announcements they want to say? Give us.
Yeah, Judy, I'd like to speak.
Good. Please.
Well, thank you. And Judy, you already saw this presentation before, but
Let me just see it again.
well, thank you. And I really just wanted to briefly talk about the ribbon cutting at Creekside Commons. I think it's really interesting given item number 10 tonight, discussion of COVID-19 and transportation. And I haven't had a chance yet to personally thank Supervisors Rodoni and Supervisor Sears for their support of the project. And I was also want to give a special thanks to Ann Richmond for showing up. I think it's really valuable for the director of TAM to take time out of hours to come and sort of see these projects in person as it relates to mobility and transportation. So I've just got a brief presentation for everybody I'd like to share. So thank you, Judy. So Reimagine Creek Park originally came out of the county's desire to address the long-term challenges of flooding in the Ross Valley. In many ways, San Anselmo is ground zero for that. So as part of that flood mitigation effort, there was going to be a removal of a building and the foundation, which was ground zero for flooding. So as part of that, I was really lucky and able to partner with the county staff, and a community group of volunteers to really execute on this. And I really have to say, special thanks to Damon for coming to the ribbon cutting, and super special thanks to Katie Sears, San Anselmo supervisor. She's been an incredible partner and really supportive of that. For those of you who have not been to San Anselmo, first of all, shame on you, but about 5 years ago, George Lucas gifted the town a park, a public space. So I consider this second open space to be the additional creation of a necklace of green space in downtown San Anselmo. Next slide, please. So this is the original site. So it was 2 buildings, and there was a French restaurant with a patio, a barber shop, a realtor, and an eyeglass shop. And I think, as you can see from here, you can't see into the park. The redwood grove is obscured. And I'd just like to discuss equity for a second, because very often, I think particularly now, there's concerns about, what can Marin do about equity? And I think there was a really interesting equity play in that, was because before, if you wanted to enjoy downtown eating in San Anselmo, you'd have to go to a French restaurant and you'd have to pay a substantial fee. With the advent of the park, literally anyone can go and enjoy dining, right? They can go to a restaurant and bring food from or bring food from their home. So that's the original site. Next slide, please. And in designing the park, what we did was, as I mentioned before, we brought together 13 members of the community, and we ran a design contest. And we literally opened it up to the world and said, work with our community and see what kind of design you had. The winner ultimately was this firm out of Mill Valley, RHAA. We actually offered no prize money. We thought that the prize would be able to have a centerpiece here in the heart of Marin. Next slide, please. So this is what the park will ultimately look like. We'll open up the creek. You see the people, you see the vistas, But we had a challenge because due to the constraints of the flood mitigation program, we're going to have an interim step where the building was torn down, but the foundation was there. So the real question is, what could we do to bridge the gap between the building and the ultimate design? Next slide, please. So what we did, and I have to be honest, I have to give all the credit to the head of our Department of Public Works, Sean Condry, and his staff. What they did was they decided to take down the building during the shelter in place, which is just incredibly efficient, because instead of waiting until after the shelter in place, when the businesses would have had an even greater challenge, we were able to do it when they were getting basically no foot traffic anyway. So here's the view from the street, and you can see we now open up to the Redwood Grove. Next slide, please. And then here's the view from looking outwards. So now you see the mountains and you can see right into downtown San Anselmo. Next slide, please. And then last Friday was the grand opening in conjunction with the street closures of downtown San Anselmo. And I will tell you, I think all of the residents were incredibly excited. And the vista, the energy from this new temporary park is incredibly different than what would have been a building. So as I said before, this is just the temporary. When the flood mitigation picks up next spring after the rains, we're going to continue on with our work. And like I said, I just wanted to thank all the supervisors again for the support, particularly Katie Rice, and just sort of share this, as I know most of our communities are wrestling with, the interplay between transportation and placemaking. And, thank you, Chair Arnold, for this opportunity.
Very good. Does anyone have any comments or questions of Brian?
Just a comment. I think it looks absolutely fantastic, Brian, and maybe you should consider taking down a few more buildings.
Okay, you're
just
always
open things up a little bit. Those vistas are great.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Okay. And we still, is this all the members still that we have, Denise?
Yes, ma'am, today.
Okay,
right now.
good. Thank you. All right. So now let's go to the executive director's report.
Did I miss the roll call earlier?
Yes, but I
just
think
thought
we,
you-
We've noted you're here,
we
Commissioner.
noted you in.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Ann.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like Member Eklund is still not arrived. Is that?
I don't
Okay.
see her, and I don't see her in the attendees either.
Okay,
just
so
keep
we'll,
her eye open.
yeah, so we'll do the oath if she arrives.
Whenever she comes.
later, Yeah, so that she's able to vote on matters. So good evening, commissioners and everyone. Ann Richmond, the Executive Director at TAM. And I do have a report for you all tonight. We put together slides again because the format seems to work well in Zoom. So I'll just run through these items, and certainly happy to answer any questions at the end. Next slide, please. Just a quick update on the shelter-in-place order and TAM's staff. At this point, we are continuing to work mostly remotely in accordance with the current health office direction. In preparation for eventual returning to work, though, we have developed our site-specific protection plan, and we are acquiring the needed supplies and signage to outfit the office. Additionally, I've continued to participate in the Transportation Industry Advisors Task Force for Marin Recovers. I think as of earlier today, the transportation recommendations have not yet been posted, but we continue to expect that that will happen soon. Next slide, please. I did want to say a few things in my report about equity and social justice, this important and complicated topic that I know you all have been spending a lot of time and deep thought on lately in your councils and boards. And just wanted to kind of remind the commission and ourselves that TAM does have a role in this, and that the agency has long supported providing equitable access for vulnerable populations here in Marin. Most recently, the 2017 Vision Plan includes among its 3 E's an equity principle with a goal to maximize mobility for all people. Some of TAM's commitments in this area include the open community-driven process for community-based transportation plans, our dedication of substantial funding for public transit, which in many cases, the ridership is composed of minority, low-income, and youth riders. We also provide funding for safe routes to schools and transportation programs for seniors and people with disabilities. We are focused on creating options so that people have better access and better mobility. And we are more and more considering equity as we develop programs, for example, with the bike share pilot and consideration of a discounted fee for low-income users. However, we can always do more, and we do intend to return to the board in a future month for a much more in-depth discussion than we can capture in this one slide on a framework for ways that the agency can continue and improve to support equity within our programs and policies and for the community. Next slide, please. So also related to the times we are in, I am pleased to announce that TAM is soliciting applications for one-time grants to local jurisdictions to support quick build projects on public streets. We would be looking for projects that support active transport, business recovery, advancing equity, and that can be implemented in a matter of weeks. For example, redesigning streetscapes for people or businesses to use more outdoor space with better access. Grants will be up to $20,000 per project and a total of about $100,000. The funds are proposed to come from the Innovation Program, which is a new program in Measure AA. This would be the first year of the program, and I know it's probably a little bit different than some of what has been discussed in the prior innovation workshops that TAM has held, but we feel that this approach meets the needs of today. And we've heard from 8 jurisdictions so far that would like to apply for these funds. Applications are due on July 2nd, and in keeping with the quick build, quick nature of this program, we expect to announce awards in mid-July for board action that month. Next slide, please. Also, in the vein of innovation, a reminder that on July 1st, that's the launch date for the new Connect to Transit partnership between TAM, Marin Transit, and our vendor Uber. This program will integrate the current TAM Get to Smart and Marin Transit Connect programs and expand the options that are available for customers in the Uber app. The TAM program will still provide a $5 incentive for shared rides to smart stations, and it also adds in several other transit hubs as eligible destinations. This also provides us with more partnerships with employers and potentially options to incentivize EVs in these shared ride fleets. There will be a transition period for the TAM program so that people who are currently using the Get to Smart program will have about a month to adjust while we continue to get the word out. Next slide, please. Also wanted to announce that dates have been set for the initial stakeholder working group meetings for the 101-580 Direct Connector project. The meetings will be held via Zoom and are open to the public, and we expect about 20 organizations and groups will be represented on this group. We look forward to meeting with them and to getting their feedback as this project kicks off. Staff has also been progressing with the interchange studies that are funded by Measure AA. We've started collecting data on existing conditions at the 11 interchanges identified in the expenditure plan, and we are reviewing other locations to add a possible 12th interchange, and we expect to bring more information back to the board soon on that. A quick construction announcement. Caltrans is currently doing work on State Route 37 to update traffic monitoring systems. This is not a flood control project per se, but it is part of a region-wide maintenance effort. And note to travelers, there will be lane shifts and use of the shoulder during construction, which is expected to last through October of this year. More local news. The city of San Rafael recently approved 2 new priority development areas, one in North San Rafael near Northgate and one in the Canal neighborhood. This designation supports eligibility for future rounds of the One Bay Area grant program and should be included in Plan Bay Area. Next, I would like to share with you all some not so great funding news. As we've talked about before, we have been working on applying for the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or Cal EVIP. This was a joint application that we were pursuing with MCE and their partner counties. And unfortunately, we recently found out that the program's recommendations for this year do not include the MCE Marin partnership. The program is also under some financial pressure this year, as you might imagine, given the state budget situation. So it remains to be seen what will end up being funded. We will continue to coordinate with MCE on our local alternative fuels program, and we will look for future opportunities, including future rounds of Cal EVIP. And I'd like to offer thanks to MCE staff for their work on this application.
And this is Kevin Haroff. I'm wondering if could you give a little more feedback on why we were told that application was denied?
I'm not sure we have all the information yet. I mean, I think when this process started, which was back around January, there was an expectation that there would be much more funding available for the program from the state. And I believe, you know, due to the state budget situation, that did get scaled back. So we'll have to look into whether we can get a debrief with the CEC folks and provide some more information to you on that.
Okay, and I can get some more information directly from MCA, and I'm sure Kate would be interested in that as well. But that's a little troubling. But thank you for the report.
Yep, thank you. Okay, another grant announcement. Caltrans recently announced the results of their Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant competitive program for this coming year. This is the program that funded TAM's bus on shoulder feasibility study. As you can see from these numbers, there was huge demand statewide, and unfortunately, the Marin application from the County Office of Emergency Services was not selected in this round. But this is an annual program, and applications usually are due in the fall, so there will be future opportunities as well. Quickly, a couple of reports from this week's California Transportation Commission meeting. Caltrans staff provided a very interesting report on telework. And as we've talked about here, and you've probably heard on the news, vehicle miles traveled and traffic in general has been way down in the state, especially early in the shelter-in-place period. And we had essentially a mass experiment with telework. So Caltrans staff in their report pointed out some of the really interesting opportunities and challenges with telework and how it had sort of applied and what some of the issues were with continuing to promote it. So their staff pledged to continue studying this and to work with local partners on further work regarding telework and transportation. And their presentation is available online on the CTC website if anyone's interested in following up on that. CTC also welcomed 2 new commissioners that were just appointed by the governor this month with Senate confirmation pending, and they are Rocco Davis from the Rockland area and Leanne Eager from Fresno. And also this month, Paul Van Kneinenberg said farewell to the commission, so several changes on that body recently. And finally, a very quick update that was not included in my written report because the County of Marin just announced yesterday that they completed one of their Safe Pathways projects that was funded by TAM. The project was to install pedestrian signals, these rapid flashing beacons at 3 locations in the county listed on the slide here, and the spots were selected based on reported issues with vehicles not yielding to pedestrians. So we're always glad when we see our projects completed and out there at work in the county. And that concludes my report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
I had a question. Charles Lee.
Okay, please.
So one is with the emergency application funding, is there a link that you can provide that would show what applications are being prioritized so that you know, I can just get an understanding of what ultimately the state's looking at for those kind of funding applications? And in general, for most that get rejected, I think it'd be good to just kind of take a look at that if it's publicly available.
It is definitely publicly available. The list of funded and the list of not funded applications are on the Caltrans website. We'd be happy to send that out to the commissioners after the meeting.
Okay, and then the other one that I thought was really interesting is with the Caltrans report on telecommuting. If you know, as things develop with that, an understanding of it's cheaper to incentivize telecommuting for companies versus the larger infrastructural projects that would enable commuting physically, and you know, kind of weighing in on that. So it would be something that I'd be interested in seeing.
Hey, anyone else with questions? Okay. I'm going to address this to the clerk. Any members of the public want to speak? Denise?
We have nobody on this item. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Anne, for your report. And now let's go to the commissioner reports. MTC Commissioner, where is he? Commissioner, there he is, Connolly, in the middle.
Good evening, everyone. I was actually unable to attend the MTC meeting this week. As you may have heard, we had some budget hearings with the county, which have been interesting, but I was able to attend a series of MTC committee meetings and actually get a quick report from someone on the commission meeting itself. So a brief update: the Blue Ribbon Task Force, which you've heard me mention in the past, which is steering the dispensing of the second tranche of CARES Act federal monies to transportation agencies in the Bay Area, has now met twice. And the resounding theme, not surprisingly, and is in kind of alignment with what Anne said, is TAM's approach is around issues concerning equity. The report out was that the Blue Ribbon Task Force will focus on equity when distributing and investing the CARES Act funding, looking at how the funds can be utilized to serve the most vulnerable, including transit-dependent populations around the Bay Area. So Nancy Whelan of Marin Transit is on the committee and is serving us well. I'll stay abreast. There are some twists and turns going on, including relating to SMART funding. So more to come on that. Second item is if the commission approved an allocation of $1.7 million to SMART in state transit assistance funds to support transit operations. So that was a good development. And then also very exciting is that MTC passed a Vision Zero policy, something a number of us have been working on for a while now. And that's a regional and equitable policy to eliminate traffic fatalities by 2030. The proposed strategy is to consolidate region-wide safety data and make that available, make policy based on data, focus on equity, and conduct outreach. And again, this is very much aligned with local initiatives that have been going on in Marin County, and again, very exciting and much more to come on this. So I look forward to further report outs in the future.
Great. Any questions of Commissioner Connolly? Okay, all right. Thank you, Damon. Next, we have the Marin Transit Report, Commissioner Rodoni.
Good evening, everyone. Our last meeting was June 1st, and I want to remind everyone our next meeting is July 13th because of the 4th of July holiday, and we have a 9:30 start. I wanted to also report on the CARES Act funding. Damon mentioned quite a bit of what I was going to report, that Nancy Whelan is taking part in that task force. The distribution is being based on need by estimated revenue loss and equity. as estimated by the transit share of low-income riders, which is really important, that part, for us at Marin Transit anyway. They expect to have some recommendations for MTC by July 22nd. And all transit agencies will be getting additional funds under this allocation of the CARES Act funding, but the funding does not fully address projected losses in sales tax and fare revenue to transit. This funding allows essential transit service to be provided in the short term, while long-term plans for recovery are developed. I also just wanted to add that as part of the COVID-19 restrictions to maintain physical distancing in transit buses, our large buses are only allowed to carry 9 passengers. Although ridership did decline significantly since the shelter in place, as we all know, waiting passengers were being passed up on heavily used routes due to the capacity constraints. On some days, as many as 100 passengers were passed up. On May 30th, Marin Transit added backup buses to the canal routes and to the routes serving 101 bus pads and the Santa Fe Transit Center. And with the added bus services, pass-ups have been significantly reduced. Marin Transit continues to monitor the pass-ups and expects on bus capacity to change in the coming weeks, allowing for more passengers on a bus. We hope that the capacity goes to double by using a mask face covering requirement that the state requires, but also a silent bus ride mandate where people aren't allowed to talk, sing, holler, which also will protect our riders. So stay tuned for that. We hope to get that in place soon. I think Dr. Willis is reviewing that protocol probably as we speak. So thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Any questions of Commissioner Rodoni? Yes.
When you do roll out the mask, is the transportation gonna be able to supply masks to people that otherwise wouldn't have them, just like temporary ones that would last a couple hours?
I don't know the specific answer to that, but since people are required to have them now, I think it'd be a good idea to
I
for
do
us to have
too.
masks available on the bus, so we can just hand them to riders if they don't.
Yeah,
So
and
I'll be discussing that with staff.
okay, and then the other interesting question I have, because I deal with capacity a lot in aviation, is ultimately with smaller bus sizes, is it because the configuration of the larger buses, or would running smaller buses more frequently ultimately help balance it out? Just understanding whether you're looking at that or if it's just really a operation policy that ultimately solves it. But that was another question I had for that capacity thing.
I think Charles, it's more about the public health officer understanding the configuration of our buses and how we believe we can safely have more riders, and that get him to understand that and accept that. But we do believe with these other measures in place that we can have a safe transit and carry about double the capacities that we're currently having. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Yes, James.
Thanks for the report, Dennis. I'm just wondering, how is Marin Transit messaging out what's going on as far as pass-ups and hopefully the reduction in pass-ups in the future to passengers?
They've been monitoring it, obviously, and recognizing what's going on. And then after May 30th, they started running additional buses that weren't being used for yellow school bus and other things that were available. I don't know specifically how they've been messaging, because a lot of these communities don't have the normal access to messaging that they would use. So I'm hoping that there's some people out there and the drivers are sharing messages with people being passed up that there's buses coming behind them. So we do have some of our new electronic boards out there now that are announcing routes. So I'm not sure if they're able to use those to message to our potential riders too. But I can follow up with that too, James. And
just wondering if they couldn't get, at the bus stops, just post something to explain to people what's going on
Well, and one clarification too, it's my understanding that the wait time, when there is a pass up, is not that great. I mean, it may be, like 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not as if you're waiting for an hour, but that doesn't alleviate the need to communicate.
I have one more thing to
Yes.
discuss about that. So also, have you looked at basically some kind of app that could flag that, you know, you anticipate a time and you basically check in so that we could get some kind of load calculation ahead of time to help with that if ultimate, you know, but
I wish
Check.
Nancy was here because she would have all these answers. I'm not into the day-to-day operation, but we can certainly have her come back next meeting and share some of that information. Thank you, though, for your suggestions.
Good questions. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rodoni. Commissioner Lucan is not here to report on SMART. Former chair of SMART, Gary Phillips, is not here. I didn't attend the last SMART meeting, so it looks like, Damon, were you there at the SMART meeting?
Yes.
Is there anything you want to?
I would say no at this time.
Okay, all right, we'll get it next time. Okay, then it looks like now we have open time for public expression up to 3 minutes for items that are not on the agenda. So let me ask. Yes.
Chair Arnold, if I may, before we open the comments, it looks like Commissioner Eklund has joined us. So
great.
if she's able to unmute, we can do the loyalty oath.
Okay, so let me just introduce Commissioner Pat Eklund, who is, probably everyone knows, she's a council member from Novato, and she's here as alternate when Commissioner Lucan cannot attend. So Pat, if you could come and take the oath of office so that you'll be able to vote on issues tonight. And Ann will.
Yep. So Commissioner Eklund, whenever you're ready, I'll just start reading and then you can repeat after me. Can you just confirm?
Is she on Zoom?
She is. We promoted her to a panelist, and she should be able to speak.
Okay, you have to, yeah.
There
As long
she
as you
is.
can mute the phone, I'm
There we
okay.
Okay, great. So I'm going to read and you can repeat.
Okay.
So I, Pat Eklund, do solemnly swear or affirm
I, Pat Eklund, do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that any any purpose of evasion
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully
that I will and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
on which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for being late. For some reason, I thought it started at 6:30.
Okay. Welcome, Pat. We are now going to, we're going to also go to the public for questions or comments.
Chair, we have none for item 5, open time.
Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Do any of the commissioners have questions or comments on the consent calendar? No, okay. Do I have a motion? Oh, do we have any members of the public that want to comment on the consent calendar?
Not on this item, Chair.
All right, do I have a motion to approve consent?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Frederick said yes. Susan, was it you? Did you second, Susan? Susan, all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have to, sorry, we have to do the
Roll call.
Okay. Clerk, here you go.
Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Carmel,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveland Knowles,
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Eklund. Aye. Commissioner Frederick,
Yes.
Commissioner Haroff,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodoni,
Yes.
Commissioner Sears,
Yes.
Chair Arnold.
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, we are now going to item number 7, and this is on Marin Commutes Program Year 1 Activity Report. And Scott is going to introduce this object. And where's Scott? Okay, there he is.
Good evening, commissioners. All right, I'm just going to pull up my presentation and hope everyone can see it.
Yep, we can.
All right, so good evening, commissioners. This is a presentation that summarizes work from our first year of implementing TAM's Marin Commutes program, described in the 1-year activity report, which is attachment A to the item. And I'll also share some highlights of what we're doing to transition into our next phase for this ongoing program. The Marin Commutes program has several elements as a public-facing program to support green commutes, either alternatives to driving or driving electric for trips that do require a vehicle. For our implementation, we've divided the areas of work into the framework shown here. A good portion of work is centered around information and education, increasing awareness of commute options, either online at marincommutes.org or through commuter and employer outreach. We also offer encouragement and support in the form of seasonal mode shift campaigns, where commuters can log trips using modes other than driving alone, a chance to build new habits, and if they leave their cars at home, we also support them through TAM's Emergency Ride Home program, which is an insurance program offering emergency rides home via taxi or TNC for those who leave their car at home and use other modes to go to work. And then we promote a range of commute options available and ways to connect to them through TAM's programs like our Van Pool Incentive Program and others that make it easier for commuters. Marin Commutes really brought together several individual incentives and programs under one umbrella and new brand of TAM, allowing them to be promoted more efficiently. marincommutes.org is the program's key resource portal. Here's a shot of the homepage where people can find information through a central location, and where people can go online to check out several commute options that have been hosted on the site to link to additional information where they can review routes and plan their next trip. And to encourage the use of alternative modes, there have been seasonal campaigns, six-week periods in the spring and the fall of 2019. We rewarded people's participation in logging their trips in what we call a gamification exercise. People really compete with themselves to see how much they can reduce in vehicle miles traveled or how many trips they can log using green modes. We would raffle $10 gift cards for weekly participants that logged a green trip to encourage participation. While realizing often recognition and personal satisfaction is what motivates people, we would also send congratulations emails to promote progress. The top commuters of the campaign, in exchange for their leadership, a couple participants received $250 gift cards for logging the most trips or the most miles. And sometimes we would get testimonials so they could lead by example. Something we added early on to the program was a trip planning and gamification software program to be used for the campaigns powered by the software company Amigos. It allows people to participate in campaigns and track their progress to reduce vehicle miles traveled or the number of green trips during a contest. And we've had a pretty good experience so far working with Amigos. It's been also used by other transportation agencies in the Bay Area, including Solano and Napa County TAs, allowing us to look at future collaborations to promote shared rides along regional corridors, such as the State Route 37 corridor, which we're currently exploring in the North Bay through the software. Part of the reason we set up the Marin Commutes program in the first place was based on a grant we received from MTC to develop our own comprehensive public-facing program here in Marin, replacing former MTC-led outreach to employers through their 511 Employer Services Program, which was greatly reduced a few years ago. Therefore, we determined early on we'd need to create a framework for planning and evaluation to build a comprehensive program over time. We use several tools to gather data on participation and understand our accomplishments. These include Google Analytics, mainly to see where information is being reviewed online. Within the Ride Amigos portion of the program, the trips that are logged and the miles of trips. And signups on our mailing list, which in the first year has been our kind of initial asking people to engage with us. And we also have other options such as Facebook and Twitter. I'm going to just discuss some overall accomplishments, and then I'll get into some more specific stats and details. So we launched marincommutes.org in early 2019 and established a Marin Commutes TDM working group with staff from several agencies. We appreciate working with us to develop the program, which are named in the one-year activity report. We implemented 2 seasonal gamification mode shift campaigns promoting shifts away from driving alone to encourage new habits, and increased participation in our van pool program and awareness and utilization, with 47 van pools traveling an average of 3,933 miles per day. We continue to offer a $150 monthly van pool incentive up to $3,600, matching a $350 incentive MTC is currently offering. And we increased awareness and participation in our emergency ride home program with 7 reimbursements and several requests for information about the program. Just as a reminder, this is really an insurance program that hopefully isn't needed due to emergencies, but some use does show us that people are keeping it in mind to support their trips. In the past years, we've seen maybe a couple trips. So we think Marin Commutes has really increased the awareness of that program as well. And finally, we developed a one-year activity report, which has been a team effort through our on-call contract with company CSW Superstro. We brought on a PM contractor, Christy Garland, to work with me, TAM's planning manager, Derek McGill, public outreach officer, Molly Graham, to put together this one-year activity report and to develop some key stats on the program as well. So we had 3,711 visits recorded on marincommutes.org in year 1, with outreach to, which included 11 presentations, 10 events, and the My Marin Commute system powered by Ride Amigos. Participation included 470 commuters registered, 23,718 green commute trips, and over 450,000 green trip miles logged. And from early on, we worked toward getting 337 individuals to sign up for the public mailing list, and 515 partners and employer contacts registered to receive program updates. And we send them information that's easy to package and disseminate within their respective organizations. Work led to some key observations and ideas for the future from lessons learned. We would certainly like to expand testimonials and examples of people's commutes. Work more with local partners to target their communities through creating targeted messages. Build our employer contacts further, working more through umbrella organizations like the Marin Economic Forum and Chambers of Commerce. From our Marin Commutes TDM working group input, we've decided we want to bring some of the trip planning features that are offered through the Ride Amigos side of the program more front and center into marincommutes.org. And given the major events and really where we are now, we've learned we really have to remain flexible and adjust the timing of our campaigns and outreach based on the events and conditions, which is a good segue into the next part of my presentation. So you're probably asking, well, with COVID-19, how does this program work in a COVID-19 environment? And we've certainly changed our focus a lot for the coming year and maybe beyond. Normally we might be making some basic tweaks based on our experience, but you'll see we've been emphasizing working from home a lot more for organizations. Currently, we have these items integrated into marincommutes.org and in discussions with organizations to consider options on promoting these more. Guides on telework, helping employers with examples of how to craft policies on how to support working remotely, and these resources can really grow. We're also looking at other telework resources. Executive Director Richmond mentioned one earlier today. We're also looking at some in counties like Santa Clara and San Mateo, and how telework, at least if done by some of the workforce some of the time, might be able to reduce VMT overall and possibly spread out the peak travel times as well. Additionally, we can try to work on getting more information from employers about their needs. We've been talking with Marin Economic Forum about what types of surveying might be helpful. We can develop webinars as opposed to in-person presentations. We'll advance the working from home section on marincommutes.org. Enhance promotion of walking and biking, which many people are interested in now particularly. We've been having some ongoing communication with the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. We feel rather than resuming our normal seasonal mode shift campaigns in 2020, which require resources, and getting people to rethink their commutes now with COVID-19, we think more of an information campaign to increase awareness of options, including telework, makes more sense as people are just kind of easing back into commuting. And we'll be continuing to work with our partners on longer term strategies, even if they're deployed more, when it makes more sense. One thing we've considered before COVID-19 is developing a car-free pledge, even if it's just for one day a week. So this program is really adaptable and can continue to evolve based on the lessons learned and evolving conditions as well. So that concludes the presentation. As an action item, we are recommending you accept the one-year activity report, and we'd greatly appreciate any other input you have.
Great. Well, let me go to the board for, before I do, let me just ask you, what is an example of a game, a gamification?
Yes, so we have a leaderboard through the Ride Amigos trip logging portion. For 6 weeks, people can log their trips. So if they leave their car at home and they use another mode, they can log their trip.
Got it.
See where they stack up in terms of how many trips
Okay,
they take.
questions, board, for our comments on this report. And I need to see the screen so I can see who's raising.
Yeah, I'm gonna open that up.
Thank you. Unless someone wants, okay, great.
Chair, we have Commissioner Carmel.
Thank you, because I can't see. Commissioner Carmel, please, do you have a question? Did he unmute?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So first of all, Scott, thanks so much for your presentation. This is really very interesting. So the first question I had was, can you put the number of trips or in some context within Marin County? So in other words, you've got on page 99, you've got 855 trips in week 7. What kind of penetration are you looking at for that when you look at that number, and how does that compare to where you expected to be at this point?
Right. So I will say that's just one portion of the program. So we did a lot of ads when we launched the program through bus ads and through other mediums, and we really are tracking a variety of data points to see what kind of effect that might have on travel. Driving people to the website was something we were tracking as well. But frankly, there's maybe a smaller subset of the population here in Marin County of people that might be really interested in logging trips through that exercise. So I think we're trying to build a baseline this first year. So in terms of like how many trips resulted outside of the tracking of the software, we're not quite sure. But I will say that's really it's kind of one data point we're looking at. We'd certainly like to grow that as a tool for people, but we're also trying to analyze the data to consider kind of how else we might want to motivate people through testimonials outside of the software. So that's certainly a small percentage of the overall trips for Marin County, relatively small.
Here's the question I've got, and here's maybe an idea. So, COVID has shown people that you can make an enormous impact on the environment, right? A positive impact on climate by not driving, right? So everyone has commented on the clean air and so forth, right? At the same time, we're going to be approaching the fire season, right? And the fire season, at least in our town here, is a really stark reminder of how important it is to make a positive impact on global warming, because we are going to just be burning down and we're going to be taking out trees, and we need to get to the root of the problem. In addition to just taking out the trees to kind of address the immediate threat that we've got. And I'm wondering whether you can build into the app and the gamification carbon footprint. So in other words, somebody can say, here's a baseline for a resident in this area or in America. Here's the carbon footprint that somebody's got. And this is how you can impact your carbon footprint by participating in this thing, by replacing trips, by doing more biking, more walking, more car sharing, more bus riding. You can reduce your carbon footprint. And people can actually see the impact that they're having on the environment, just like they can see the impact that's taking place right now through COVID. And I think that might be a really compelling way to get people to participate in this thing, because then they can really see the benefit that they're having on the environment. And I think this is particularly true if you get younger people involved in this, because as we all know, whoever's got young people living in their household or around them, they are incredibly passionate about the environment and they really want to make a big impact. And getting them involved in this thing and getting them to be advocates for this thing is a great way to influence everybody in the household. It just compels people to change their behavior. And I'm wondering if that's a component of this thing that we can try to build into it.
Yeah, the Right Amigos software has some proxies for, it gets a little bit complicated because we're not talking about prospective investments. These are existing services. So some of the tools that evaluate prospective optional investments might consider, the emission factors associated with the transit vehicle. But for existing services that are already available to people, we're trying to present a menu of options for people to consider. So they leave their car at home and they fill a seat on the bus. Great. If we can get people to walk and bike more, that's great as well. So at this point, we're trying to build that baseline of participation, and then we can try to build in some more scientific tools related to actual on the ground movement of people from driving alone to other options. I mean, there are tools out there, but at this level, until we get some type of critical mass, it's harder to present a really accurate depiction of the trips, especially given the fact that it's only a subset of the population that are actually participating in these activities where they're actually logging the trips. That may not be representative of other trips that are influenced by this program that aren't necessarily leading to people logging trips through this software program that some people like to do and some people frankly would probably not do, but they may be hearing about the program and learning about how they can take trips outside of the trips that they'd be logging. So, but we can certainly, I think that's a great suggestion, and we can certainly look into some of the tools out there.
I mean, in Mill Valley, we could pilot a program if we had a carbon calculator and families could use this thing as a way of getting a trip reduction, for example, to schools as an example. We could do a pilot program here in this town to just see the kind of impact that you've got, if that would be something that would be interesting and something that would add value to the bigger program. We could try to do something here as part of safe routes to schools as a way of getting people out of cars and using alternative means just to see how impactful it could be. And I think it would be really impactful. I think people would be surprised at the reduction that they can personally make. And again, that's right because of COVID and because of the things that are going to be taking place in our environment here within a very short period of time, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, especially to build on some of the ideas we've had to expand our testimonials and try to make it more of a personal feel. So I think that's a good idea, and we can certainly follow up on that.
Thanks.
We have John Reed, and then we have James Campbell.
Okay. I mean, I think you're really right. I mean, I think that the participation in where we can gather data is really difficult. A lot of people are changing their behavior just because they see that it's the right thing to do, but also it works and it's fun. You get exercise. There's a way to, it works on many levels. And engaging participation in what Tam is doing and what you're doing is the problem, of course. And you really have to, I mean, I'm one of those users, but I haven't logged any miles, I mean, it's, my time, I have to have a reason to want to do that besides seeing how the program works. I think most people are in exactly those things which is why it's so difficult to have some reliable numbers on how it's changing behavior. But I think that there are the carbon use and the safe routes to school models are really excellent. And there's been talk in Fairfax also of using a carbon meter to, have a participatory program where people can understand what they're doing. And, we've had local nonprofits attempt at this also. And I think it could really get legs and get people doing that. And Safe Routes to School is a congestion mitigation program, ultimately, as this could be, is also. And I think it really warrants focusing in and really building into a robust program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. James.
Thank you, Scott, for the report. I just wanted to follow up on something Urban said. I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in Italy in the last few years. And when the low-cost air carriers moved in, Trenitalia and the other train systems started printing on every ticket how much carbon emissions the trip would take if you took a plane versus a train or your own personal car. And that actually was very effective to get people for, more time, but a similar cost to stay out of airplanes and their cars and to ride the train. So it might be worth looking into.
There you go. All right. Anyone else with a comment or question? Yes, Charles.
Hi, Scott. Thanks. So I'm going to build on what Urban talked about, but I'm going to come at it a little bit different. What I've heard Scott say is that it's the actual adoption that really needs to be enhanced with this program. So I was going to ask him a few questions. Have you thought about, to me, apps are successful when they integrate, right? So there's already, the iPhones are already tracking steps, right? There's a lot of different ways that those metrics are being generated. The question is, do our apps tie into it? And part of that is have you sought relationships with Peloton? Because ultimately, here they are riding their bikes. They're already doing that leaderboard gamification. If you could tie into it, that would encourage them to come out into the built environment and still, share those leaderboards and be successful. You're going to see a bigger uptick of everybody because, those capabilities of adopting and sharing the data. And ultimately, we want the data because Peloton doesn't care about carbon footprint, but maybe that's where, as an organization, we care more about showing the overall effects and education and incentivization. Another one I heard you talk about was children. So the big software that basically got children out there last year was that VR game where they went out and tried to grab Pokemon. So ultimately, can we make a special program with the VR group where if they go on designated trails or go on a bus, or they get access, those kind of incentivizations through new VR software and stuff like that would probably help get the children involved. And then, I'm a little iffy about screen time because I think everybody's getting too much of that these days, but also it's where their minds are at. And so really it's about getting them outside. And if ultimately it's a fusion of that, I think that'd be good. The only other one is do we have targeted social media campaigns and Facebook and stuff like that that are actually getting it out there to certain people that we know will adopt it more, and then also do kind of alerts where, once you do a run or something, you can post it back into Facebook to then encourage your social group. Those are the few comments I had. So
great, thanks. Go ahead, Scott.
If I may, so those are all good points. I will say to answer your initial questions about tying into apps, data, the trip planning and logging software through Amigos does tie into carpooling apps like Waze and Scoop, as well as allows people to plan trips using local transit options such as Smart or Marin Transit services. So we have been pretty happy in that respect. So yeah, and to your, I think in terms of our overall program, I think it is flexible. So we haven't done a lot of outreach to parents or students because we have a separate Safe Routes to Schools effort. But it's, this first year has been kind of cast a fairly wide net, trying to engage as many people as we can. But I think as far as focusing in on certain areas of the population, I think it's certainly something we will do. So those are all good suggestions.
Okay, good. I don't see any other
I
questions.
have one more quick comment,
Oh,
Jane.
I didn't see your hand, sorry.
No, that's right. It's probably hidden among all the books. I just want to, I appreciate everybody's comments, and I really appreciate Urban's perspective on, perhaps running a pilot targeted towards young people who would be very cognizant of, for all the reasons that he said. Just want to offer some support. That's all. And thanks, Scott, for the presentation.
Okay, all right, anyone else? All right, then we're going to see if we have any members of the public that want to speak. Denise?
Well, we have nobody who has come in via email, and for those viewing the meeting, I don't see any hands raised, so no comment on this item.
Okay, all right, and there is action item. We are to receive the report, correct?
It's technically accept the report.
Accept the report, okay. So do I have a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Second.
And who was second? John. Okay, the motion was Alice, seconded by John Reed. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Campbell.
Aye.
Commissioner Carmel.
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveland Knowles.
Yes.
Commissioner Colbert.
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly.
Aye.
Commissioner Eklund.
Aye.
Commissioner Fredericks.
Yes.
Commissioner Haroff.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Commissioner Rice.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodoni.
Yes.
Commissioner Sears.
Yes.
Chair Arnold.
Yes.
That motion is unanimously approved.
All right, thank you. All right, we are now going to go to, are we on item 8? Yes, we're on item 8. And this is to update revenue and expenditure components for the Measure AA strategic plan. And David is going to take this one over. Hi.
Hi, let me get set up my presentation.
Okay.
While David gets that set up, maybe I'll just say a quick word, if I may. This is Ann
Sure.
Richmond again. So David will walk through in quite a lot of detail the details on this and kind of how we are using these projections to sort of develop the budget for this next fiscal year as well. But I just also wanted to kind of point out that I think this presentation, as well as the next item, the budget itself, will address a lot of the questions and comments that you all presented to us at the last board meeting regarding the FY 2021 annual budget. So I look forward to our discussion, and as I said, this is quite a detailed and deep presentation on the fiscal picture for the agency.
Great, thank you, Ann. You ready to go, Dave?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening, David Chan, Programming Manager. I have a presentation on the Measure AA strategic plan. It's a little bit different this year. Normally, for those who've been on the TAM board, you remember we come to you with a strategic plan to adopt, and most of the information are pretty predictable. This year is a little different. We're asking you to adopt a revenue forecast. So let me start with my background. The Measure A expenditure plan direct TAM to prepare a strategic plan, and that strategic plan helps us identify the revenue, the priority of projects, and when those projects will be ready to use these Measure AA fund. The strategic plan was prepared and adopted by the TAM board last year in June 2019. It is updated every other year, but the revenue and expenditure component will be updated annually. And the revenue expenditure component is really the heart of the document. And it really updates the revenue forecast and reviews the cash flow needs of each project and program so that we can determine the reimbursement. Because of COVID-19 and the shelter in place, different revenue scenarios were developed this year really to determine the impacts to the project and program to the strategic plan, and in particular in the near term. And that's really what's the most important, it's the near term. As I mentioned, prior to COVID-19 and the shelter in place, collection of the revenue was predictable. For the last 10 years, we got an annual growth of 3%, and we can count on that every year. How much decrease in sales tax revenue caused by COVID-19 and for how long, we really don't know, and it may take us years to realize. So we developed 3 scenarios on revenue collection, and that is to compare what the revenue forecast adopted by the TAM board in June 2019. And the 3 are best case scenario, moderate case scenario, and worst case scenario. The best case scenario really assumes that the reopening economy will go smoothly with no major setback. There might be some fluctuation at the end of the year, but it should go pretty smoothly. The moderate case scenario assumes a reopening of the economy, but we will experience some major setback and maybe even return to a shelter in place again, and the recovery of the economy will not take place for another 2 to 3 years. And the worst case scenario is that we will assume there will be a major wave of COVID-19 this year. All the damage will become long-term. The nation will go into a recession that's worse than the 2008 recession. And we will need about 5 years to recover. And the table here, by the way, all the table you see on my presentation is also on the memo. So if you wanted to go into greater detail, all these tables are also listed in the memo. But what you see in this table is a comparison of all the revenue scenario. The top is the adopted 2019 by the TAM board last year, and it shows an aggregated amount of over 30 years of $1.2 billion. And under each scenario, you see also the growth and the revenue. And the best case scenario, you see that next year we'll maintain the 27.5 million. We're gonna use that as a benchmark, 27.5 million, which is what we expect to collect this year. Under the best case scenario, we'll maintain that amount. And then you'll see there's gonna be a 2 years negative growth before the economy or the revenue collection goes up in fiscal year 23-24, and the aggregated amount over 30 years is slightly less than the projected. It's about 1.15 billion. Moderate case scenario, you'll notice that next year we'll have a 10% decrease, followed by 2 additional years of decrease before the economy or the revenue goes back up in 23-24. The aggregated amount of collection is a little over $1 billion. And then the worst case scenario, that's where I mentioned that it would take about 5 years for the recovery of revenue. And in that time span, over 30 years, will be a drastic reduction in revenue, a little under 900 million. So we have ways to address some of this revenue decline. We have reserve funds. We normally take 5% off the top of Measure A and AA. We currently have 5.4 million available to offset the decline and maintain the $27.5 million commitment for fiscal year 2021, and a little bit to reduce some of the negative impact in future year. We're recommending that we collect no Measure AA reserve funds for any years that experience 0 or negative growth. It wouldn't make sense otherwise to collect Measure A reserve fund and also at the same time distribute them. It would negate the effect. And the way it works is that if you look at the table 2, under the best case scenario, starting next year, we predicted that we maintain the 27.5, and the following year, 21-22, there would be a decrease, and we would use 690,000 to make up the difference so that we can reach the 27.5, and we'll have enough reserve for the following 2 years after that. And on the right-hand column, you'll see that we would use 2.7, we will have $2.7 million remaining in reserve funds if we were to follow this scenario. Under the moderate case scenario, you'll know that we will use $2.7 million next year, and we'll have a little bit, we have about half of that amount, 2.65 the following years. And then after that, starting in fiscal year 22-23, we will have no more reserve funds. And so we would have to live with what we collect. And then the worst case scenario, obviously, is that you would use up most of the reserve fund in the first year, and you only have a little bit left the following years. And then it's starting to go down.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So how are reserve fund released? Option one is that we distribute.
David, can I interrupt for a second? I'm sorry to
Sure.
interrupt, but could everyone make sure that they have muted their microphones, because we're getting a lot of feedback. Somebody's got fun stuff going on in the background. It's making it hard to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, the question is how do the reserve fund gets released? Option one is that we distribute the proportional share, and this is in accordance to the expenditure plan requirement. And option two, which is what we're recommending, is only released to the strategy and category that have a need for this money at this time, and that the recipient can commit to a reasonable repayment schedule. And the reason being is that if we're not going to release the money in proportional share, there's an expectation that the recipient will have to pay back the money, because ultimately at the end, we have to true up all the reserve money that is collected. They're collected by proportional share, and they're released and given back to each category and each project by proportional share. We're recommending option two at this time. We also have a little bit of interest money that has been earned that can be used. By the end of this fiscal year, we will have earned about $6.26 million in interest funds. We have spent a program $4.53 million, so we have about $1.73 million available. Interest money can be programmed to any allowable expense that's authorized by Measure A and AA, and this is really at the discretion of the TAM board. The way we have used interest fund in the past is we use it judiciously as an emergency fund, really to fund shortfall for projects and programs that have no other recourse. And the TAM board has the discretion to use this money to offset the decline in Measure AA revenue collection during the shelter-in-place order. But we're recommending to maintain the past practice of holding these funds for emergency use only, and essentially as an emergency reserve. Some of the impact to the programs and project, transit, they receive 55% of the funds, so any revenue decline would impact this category the most in terms of just dollar amount. 55% is a significant amount, and if there's a decline in revenue, they definitely feel the effect. Impact to transit, this is just a table to show how in the first year, in fiscal year 2021, which is next year, if you compare the adopted number to the worst case scenario, there'll be a 16% drop, and it gets worse the following year in 2021. You'll notice the same, under the same comparison, it would be a 21% drop. To local infrastructure, this is the money that every city gets. They get it upfront at the beginning of the year. It's based on revenue collection from the prior year. It's not based on reimbursement. Once we sign a funding agreement with each city, I release the money to the cities. Therefore, under the three scenario, next year's allocation, which was adopted under the consent item, are the same, because it's based on revenue collection from fiscal year 1920. But what you will see is that starting in fiscal year 21-23, under the three scenario, that's where you'll see the difference. And if we were not to use any reserve fund next year in fiscal year 21-22, there's a 8.5% decrease between the adopted and the worst case scenario, which is not that, probably not that bad in terms of what the city would have to do. And what they will start feeling the effect is that if this is the worst case scenario compared to the adopted, there will be a 41% decrease starting in fiscal year 26-27. 26-27 is really based on revenue that's collected in fiscal year 25-26. And this is just to show you the impact under the 3 scenario, and the 41% will be pretty dramatic. Again, I mentioned that the near term appears to be manageable, but the long term is pretty drastic and can cause severe setback to the program and really have a negative impact on the payment condition index of PCI, which is what every jurisdiction in the Bay Area go by in determining how much impact funding can have on their program. Safe Route to School, we're currently entering into the final year of the program. We have existing carryover that's sufficient to fund the current contract to term, but the table below here really shows you the decline in revenue under the 3-case scenario, and that we will come back pretty shortly to present some approaches and options for the board to consider with the Safe Route to School program. Same thing with the crossing guard. This is the largest Measure AA program that's managed by TAM. We have sufficient carryover to maintain the current level for next year, but that contract's coming up and we will need to implement program changes to address funding decline, and we will bring back again very shortly approaches and options for the TAM board to consider what to do with this program if revenue decline really decreases as shown in the scenario. We also have other projects and programs that TAM manages, such as MSN, the Connector, the Interchange program, Safe Pathway, and others. We have, if revenue decline, as we see under the scenario, most of these projects will be able to be delivered by seeking other funds. And we can also manage cash flow, and the last resort. Again, this is the last resort. If we need to, we can reduce scope. Just to switch gear a little, I want to talk a little bit about the Measure A funds. We still have unspent Measure A funds, as I mentioned, with the Measure A interest, but we also have other Measure A funds that's still being collected, even though Measure A technically is ended on March 31st, 2019, but there's still Measure A fund that's being collected by the state, and they will continue to come in over the next couple of years, and there will be some cleanup that we have to do. We manage the Measure A fund that's separate from the Measure AA fund, but we're proposing to merge the Measure A fund information with the Measure AA fund information in one strategic plan next year. We still will keep them separate from an accounting standpoint, but next year when we bring to you the strategic plan, we'll merge the two funding sources to give you a comprehensive report on the program, so that you know where all the monies are and where all the monies are going. These revenue scenario has been presented to the FGL Executive Committee. They adopted the moderate case scenario and option 2 of the reserve fund policy on June 8th. We also made the revenue and expenditures component available for Marin Transit to review, along with the Marin Managers Association on June 11th, the Citizen Oversight Committee on June 15th, and then we also went to the Marin Public Works Association on June 18th. So the next step is that this is going to be a long-term process. We have to evaluate the program's impact over time, in particular the Safe Route to School program and the Crossing Guard program. We will have to work closely with the transit operator and local jurisdiction to understand the impact to them and how we can help them during this time. And then we have to monitor the revenue and economic recovery closely and come back. We need to come back on a regular basis and update the TAM board. So the action before you today is to adopt, as recommended by the executive committee, the moderate case scenario, option 2 of the reserve fund policy, including the policy not to collect reserve fund off the top in years with negative or no growth in revenue, and then assume collection of revenue of reserve funds in years with positive growth. And if adopted, this will be reflected in next year's TAM's annual budget. So I'll be happy to answer any question along with Lee, John, and Ann Richmond, and we'll address any questions you may have.
Let me just ask you a quick question. That the slide be 2 slides back, you list where you presented this to the Marin managers and to, did they, I'm sure they probably didn't take a vote, but did they indicate which, what they thought of the 3 options?
So this is Ann. I'll jump in here because Dave wasn't at that meeting. I was at that meeting.
Okay.
We didn't ask them to take a position on the options. We just presented the information, and I think they thought that it was a reasonable approach to have those different scenarios.
Great. Thank you. All right. If you'll take this screen off here, I can look to see who has their hand up. Who has a question, first of all? Yes, Commissioner Sears.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Dave, for the presentation. That was very helpful. And I think it certainly did go a long way to addressing some of the issues that I had in the last presentation. The one thing that I might ask if you would consider is on your slide on action recommended today, on option 2 of the reserve fund policy, where you talk about not collecting the reserve fund off the top in years forecast with negative or no growth in revenue, and then resume collection in years with positive growth. I wonder if we might want to set a floor on the positive growth. So if positive growth is, only 1% or some very modest amount, where taking that 5% off the top still might have a negative impact. Perhaps we won't want to do it in those circumstances. So I wondered if you might give some thought to whether there's an appropriate line to draw there.
Can I refer to Lee, John?
Sure.
Lee, can you address that question about reserve funds collection?
Sure. We can definitely take that into consideration. And also what I want to also point out is the recommendation right now for the usage of reserve actually is option 2, which actually it's only, the project sponsors that really need access to the reserve will come and request the access to the reserve from this agency. So there's a chance that the usage of reserve might not be as high as we expected. Depends on the funding situation with various projects and programs that's are only eligible, obviously, under the sales tax program project. So what we can do is we can definitely take into the consideration of the growth of the revenue along with the reserve we have in the balance we have in the reserve at that time point, and then come up with a more refined reserve usage policy.
Great, thank you.
Right, any other questions before I open the hearing?
I believe Commissioner Colbert.
Oh, missed it. Unmute it.
Sorry, Judy, are we taking questions or commentary at this point?
Questions now.
Then I will wait for commentary.
Okay, yes.
I have one question for David. Thanks for that. So with the capital improvement project, you said that there might be other funding resources that could be identified and sought after. And I'm always wondering why we're not just doing that during these economic times to basically allow for other, the funds to go other places, ultimately, if there are funds available. So just kind of developing that and what that mindset was when you made that statement.
Oh, absolutely. We actually always look for funding opportunity, regardless of the situation. I mean, there's always funding opportunity from the region, from the state, and sometimes from the federal government. And if they present themselves, we definitely go after them.
Right. So that was an opportunistic kind of, it wasn't that there already are or things that normally we wouldn't because they have other use. This was if something arises that we would then look at that. But I would just always favor that and say, you know, yeah, keep your eye out.
Any way we can preserve our Measure A funds, we will definitely do. And also, I just want to mention that when these funds becomes available, we encourage all of the local city to apply, and we make those information available to them and help them with their application if needed.
Great. Okay, any other questions? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'm going to go to any person from the public that wants to comment on this.
Chair Arnold, I do not see anything that's come in via email, and for those viewing the meeting tonight, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we are back again asking for a vote. Do you want to, it's to take option 2. Do you want exact wording on it?
May I have for a comment, Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I just want to, and as thanks for the report, David. And as you mentioned, 8 is, you know, sort of tying into 9. And it seems that, you know, crossing guards are always an incredible conundrum, well, to their funding and all kinds of stuff. And I just want to note that the image on the proposed annual budget is of a crossing guard, right? It is the most visible thing that our community sees. So I recognize that you're coming back with options, but I just sort of encourage you to keep that in mind. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments from the board? All right, so if you're ready, let's have a motion to
Madam
accept.
Chair,
Yes.
I'd be remiss in also talking about Safe Routes to Schools in the same way. I mean, it's a smaller budget, but an amazing program in terms of the changes that it has in the community, and getting kids to take low carbon ways to school and just solving problems. I think it's very important also.
Good, thank you. All right, are we ready? We're going to David, how you want to stress when we want to accept option 2 and approve this for what the executive committee brought to the full board, correct?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I can make that motion to.
Thank you, Susan.
Case scenario and option 2 with the reserve fund policy.
Perfect.
James Campbell, I'll second that motion.
All right. Let's roll.
All right, here we go. Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Carmel,
Yes.
Commissioner Cleveland Knowles,
Yes.
Commissioner Colbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Eklund,
Aye.
Commissioner Fredericks,
Yes.
Commissioner Haroff,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee, Commissioner
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodoni,
Aye.
Commissioner Sears,
Yes.
and Chair Arnold.
Aye.
That item is unanimously approved.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good discussion. All right, we are now going to item 9, and this is adoption of the proposed TAM fiscal year 2021 annual budget. And I bet it's going to be Lee on deck next.
Yes, it will be.
Yes. Okay.
So, but at first, Chair Arnold, if you don't mind, can you open the public hearing process for this item?
Yes,
And ask for, yeah.
I'm going to open the hearing for this budget item. What do you want me to, do you want to have a question asked? Lee?
So,
Go ahead, Lee.
yeah, so item 9A, under this agenda item, will be open the budget for public hearing tonight. And then we will obviously hear any public who has comments for our board and for staff tonight. And Denise, do we have any public comments at this time point?
We do have a gentleman who has sent something in writing, but he is also, I believe he is also attending the meeting. Let's see if he's still here, otherwise I will read it.
Right.
Well, here he is.
Okay. State your name,
Mueller?
please.
Mr. Mueller, you're free to talk.
Thank you. I'd actually prefer that you read the comment, please.
Oh, okay, very good. I can do that. Okay, so David Mueller says, Dear Board of Commissioners, this is Agenda Item 9, adoption of the proposed TAM FY 2020-21 annual budget. Dear Board of Commissioners, we support adoption of the FY 2021 TAM budget as proposed. In particular, we support the board allocated $345,000 for Measure B Element 3.3, Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program. We are pleased to see the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program featured prominently in TAM's FY 2021 work plan, with major work items expected to be delivered in the public information and outreach and planning and program management categories. We look forward to participating in this work, and especially the development and launch of the 2021 Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program as listed on slide 20. We are also pleased to see the FY 2021 work plan includes review of the Measure B expenditure plan. One of our continuing concerns has been TAM's consistent underspending of the annual budget for the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program. On this issue, we have been in contact with staff and believe more complete utilization of the budget can be achieved by allocating a significant portion of the budget specifically to TAM, identifying, studying, communicating, and promoting forward-looking opportunities while preserving the balance of the budget for the less predictable costs of TAM helping fund projects by others based on these opportunities. Additionally, to help guide staff and prioritize expenditure of the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Program budget, we again urge the board to adopt specific metric goals for the program. In particular, we recommend the board set FY 2021 goals of increasing the number of public charging ports in Marin by a specified percent, and increasing the percentage of electric fleet vehicle purchases by a specified amount. We need to act fast, as internal combustion engine vehicle purchase now will remain on the road for 12 to 15 years. Finally, looking ahead, if MCE receives CEC, California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project, CALIVIP, funds to install more electric charging infrastructure in its service territory, we recommend the TAM consider increasing its FY 2021 funding commitment to assist in this effort. And it is signed respectfully, David Mueller, Larkspur, the Climate Reality Project Bay Area Chapter, Kiki Laporta, Fairfax Sustainable Marin, and David Fox, San Anselmo Sustainable San Anselmo. And I believe that's his comment.
Thank you. And are there any others?
Let me see. I don't see any other hands raised, and we have nothing in writing, so I'm going to say that's it for public comment.
Okay. So now we are going to go to Lee.
Yes, so I'm going to pull up the presentation, and also I want to discuss some technical risk I might have tonight. My house, along with 50 other houses on this, in this neighborhood, just lost power.
Oh my God.
I know, about 20 minutes ago, so my apology. I think when I lost the meeting, when I tried to come back and through backup, through hotspot, I might cause some, noise there. And then also, just so if I disappear from the screen, you guys know what happened.
Okay.
And then Ann would jump in and try to save me.
Okay.
So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. And also, this will be a team presentation between me and Ann. I will cover the first half, which is the boring number section. And then Ann actually will share with the group all the exciting work highlights we have for the upcoming year. So Here's the timeline. As you know, especially for those of you who has been with us from the beginning of this budget process, we are at the finish line. You know, we had extensive review of the budget document in April and in May by the exec committee, by the board, by the COC, by the Marin Managers Association. So tonight, what we're doing, you know, we just finished the public hearing. Now we're doing the final review of the budget and then hopefully getting to the adoption of the final budget tonight. Two very quick updates since the May 28th TAM board review. As Dave just reported, the TAM board just adopted the moderate scenario under item 8 as the, and also as part of that, we reset the FY 2021 sales tax revenue to 24.75 million. But we want to emphasize again, we will use reserve to maintain the 27.5 million funding level we promised to the funding agencies early this year. As you know, due to the timing difference, we have to release numbers to our partner agencies so they know what to plan for the coming year. So we will maintain that funding level, even though we have a reduction of the budget in our own budget document. And then the other update I want to report is, as you approved as part of the consent item, we are getting close to the final stage of the lease negotiation with our current landlord. And this is probably one thing COVID-19 kind of helped us. We were actually able to negotiate and reduce the rent we are being charged in the current location. And we're expecting a close to $60,000 savings for the upcoming year. And the total savings over the 5-year lease period, new lease period, will be over $200,000. And once we exit the lease with the landlord, we will adjust the budget line for the lease item accordingly. So very quick overview on the 5 main components of the budget document. Some of you might still recall this is, we redesigned the document last year. This is the 2nd year. So we have the executive director's message, which give you the overview of the accomplishment and also the forward-looking of the agency's work. And then also we have the budget general overview, the annual budget process and review, and then we have the work plans by function. Then in the appendix, mostly it's our salary schedule, which is required to be approved by the board as part of the CARPERS requirement. Very quickly, here is the new revenue level based on the action you just take under item 8. As you can see, close to 70% of this agency's revenue is from the Half-Cent sales tax plus the $10 vehicle registration fee. And here is the total expenditure for the upcoming year. Again, close to 80% of the total expenditure of the projects and programs are being funded under the Half-Cent sales tax as well as the VIF. So this is a question we typically get from board members and publics in years that we had comments on the budget, which is how can you spend more than you have? So I just want to point out, especially for the new commissioners we have here, we're a funding agency, and our sales tax as well as the VIF tax fee are collected in advance of any expenditure, any project needs. So those funds do allow us to accumulate in the fund, a fund balance, and then when the project and program delivery does pick up, we have sufficient carryover from prior year to cover the overspending. So for 2021, you can see expenditures exceed revenue by more than $17 million, but we are going to most likely finish the current year, with about $40 million still in fund balance. And then even if we fully spend all the expenditures we expected for the upcoming year, we are still going to have a 22 million or more fund balance at the end of next year. So very quickly on the different spending categories we have in the budget. For the administration, I just want to point out, we do have a small savings in the administration category compared to last year's budget, compared actually to this year's budget, the current year. I guess we still have a couple of days left for this year, and also compared to actual from 18-19. And the two major items that we have some savings, one is salary and benefit. As you recall, staff did not request any COLA adjustment for this year. And then because we don't have an overlap of the ED position, so the salary and benefit costs went down a little bit. And then also, as I mentioned, we are expecting a 20% reduction in the office lease line item once the new lease is signed. So moving to the professional service category, this is where most of our projects, professional projects and program design work, research work, planning work are funded. As you can see, the numbers, if you compare them to the 18-19 actual, and if you compare to the 19-20 final budget, it's actually quite lower for the upcoming year. Mostly it's because we finished the design work for MSN. All design work for MSN are completed. We are moving into construction. And then also we are finished up the design work on the North-South Greenway gap closure project. So under Measure A, as you can expect, the new sales Measure A kicked in April 1st, 2019. So we're phasing out in terms the Measure A expenditure. As you can see, Marin Transit will be mostly fully spending all the fund balance under Measure A, under the old sales tax expenditure plan. And then major roads and as well as the Safe Passway capital projects, which understandably are those capital projects that takes longer, takes more time to deliver, they still have fund balance under Measure A. So you can see there are the lion's share of the Measure AA expenditure for the upcoming year for 2021. So moving into Measure AA, which is the renewal of the sales tax, not surprisingly, you will see the expenditure of the projects and program picking up. So we will be looking at almost $26 million in Measure AA expenditures for the upcoming year for transit. And then, we also have all the exciting highway projects going on under Category 1, the completion of the MSN project, the 580-101 Direct Connect project, as well as all the interchange studies we have undergoing right now. And then also under transit, the remaining needs of the transit for the upcoming year after the fully spent under Measure A will be met by Measure AA. So Measure B, I just want to point out, you see the final budget for 1920 is much higher than the upcoming year's budget. This mostly is due to the 3-year allocation cycle we have for the local streets and roads category, which is element 1.1, which is not even showing on this year's budget because we had an allocation last year and they're not expecting another allocation in 2 years. Because the small amount they're getting out of this program annually, we decided to do a 3-year allocation cycle instead annually. The other thing I want to point out is we appreciate all the comments, all the input we got from the EV group. And as staff report before, we will come back with more detailed information on how the funds under the EV program will be spent and what other ways we can further improve and more focus on the program. So interagency agreement category, I just want to point out, as you can see, this is another category we have major expenditure expected for the upcoming year. And most of them, as you probably can tell from looking at the table, the comparison between the 1920 final budget and actual, most of them actually just work delayed and could not be delivered in this current fiscal year and get pushed into the 2021. For example, the North-South Greenway construction, which we are expecting to start very soon. And then also the Caltrans MSN Phase 2 HOV lane right-of-way and construction support, as well as the work related to the Benham Boulevard construction management. So we are looking for a total of about $14 million worth of construction work under this category, carried out by our partner agencies. So the last category we have in the budget in terms of numbers is the Transportation for Clean Air program. This is a small special funding program coming from a $4 vehicle registration fee in the state, and the agency gets a share of that. And then our expected expenditure for the upcoming year is about $1 million. I believe it's mostly from a project from City of Sausalito, and then If I remember correctly, it might be a project from Mill Valley. So that actually, with that, I'm done with, as I mentioned, the number portion of the budget. I guess I can take any question now, or I can pass it to Ann to start the work plan report, and then we can take question at the end of it, if that's so.
Maybe I'll just continue on if there are no pressing questions, and we can take questions at the end. And congratulations, Lee, on making it through without any further losses of power in your home there. So the budget document is also a place for TAM to identify the agency's main planned work for the coming year. So I'll just quickly go over some of the major items that each group will be tackling in order to fulfill TAM's mission within the resources that we have identified. And this is not meant to cover everything that staff does. You know, those of you who have been with TAM much longer than me are very familiar with the ongoing work and programs. And we certainly know from this year that things don't always go as expected, but we just wanted to present some of the major items and set the stage for detailed discussions on some of the individual programs and projects that we will be bringing back to you throughout the year. Next slide. Lee, I think you're on the slides, right? Next slide. Thank you. So some functions are, of course, cross-cutting and involve multiple departments and functions within TAM, and these are shown on this slide and include our work with local jurisdictions and the transit agencies on funding opportunities, representing TAM in dialogue with the public, other agencies, and the community at large, coordinating with regional and state partners on planning and projects, monitoring legislation and supporting measures that advance transportation interests, and providing local support for regional, state, and federal projects that are happening in Marin County. Next slide, please. For the administration and finance function, there's of course a lot of ongoing work behind the scenes, such as budget management, accounts payable, payroll, HR functions, etc. But in addition, I wanted to highlight two initiatives this year. The first, as already mentioned, is the office lease extension, and we are getting close to executing that, as noted in prior items. Hopefully that will even happen right around the end of the month. The second is that we are planning to upgrade TAM's IT system to modernize data storage and access. The system is sufficient for the way things have been done recently, but we do want to upgrade it. We think it'll help us deal with some of the situations that we've had even since I've been here at TAM, such as the public safety power shutoffs, the shelter-in-place order, et cetera. So we evaluated different options for upgrading the system, and we plan to undertake some of those improvements starting pretty much right away. Next slide, please. For public outreach and information, some of the major items include outreach on key programs such as the interchange study, the bus on shoulder study, the Marin Commutes programs, some of the other ones that we've talked about tonight. Public engagement for major capital projects like the Marin Sonoma Narrows, the North-South Greenway, Bellum Boulevard, and the Direct Connector. Supporting outreach for partner projects in Marin, for example, ramp metering, safe pathways projects, and other TAM-funded projects as well. And then ongoing coordination with media and community partners on information and outreach regarding TAM and our programs. Next slide, please. There we go. For the planning department, some of the major initiatives that we expect for next year include managing the bus on shoulder feasibility study, working with various parties on the Plan Bay Area 2050 development, some long-range planning, including gearing up for an update of the strategic vision plan expected in 2021, initiating the San Rafael Canal Neighborhood Community-Based Transportation Plan, doing the traffic monitoring for the next congestion management program and system monitoring report, and continuing to work on the travel model. For program management, Some of the upcoming activities include the launch of the Marin-Sonoma pilot bike share program later in the year, implementing the Marin Commutes program along with the adaptations that we've discussed earlier, implementing this year's alternative fuels program, and I would note on that we expect to return to the board soon with more details for this program. Continuing work on developing the sea level rise coordination and programming, and implementation of the innovation program with the quick build for the first round, and then further developments to that program for the future rounds of funding. Next slide, please. For fund programming and legislation activities for this coming year, we expect to accomplish some of these items here, including Measure B includes a 10-year review of the expenditure plan, which would be due by next spring. So we will be working with stakeholders in the board on that. And I would note that we are not proposing any changes to the Measure B framework for this coming fiscal year, but we will be undertaking this evaluation during the year and then potentially exploring any updates for the following fiscal year, FY22. In addition, we will be this year updating the Measure AA and A strategic plans, again, similar to what you saw tonight, but for next year. We will be working with local agencies on active transportation program applications and other funding applications that may arise. I think it is time again to develop the STIP program and work with CTC on the allocations for that. And then, as always, developing the annual state legislative platform and bill monitoring. So last but not least, for the project management group, we will be trying to continue building the momentum on the State Route 37 environmental studies and preliminary engineering work. For the Marin-Sonoma Narrows B7 segment, we anticipate completing design, and then if all the funding comes into place as we expect, we hope to start construction in 2021. We anticipate getting the Bellum Boulevard project to construction this year and beginning construction on the north-south Greenway segment over the Corte Madera Creek. We will continue project development for the 101-580 direct connector project, and we also expect to continue to make progress on the 101 interchange study. So a busy year ahead, I would say. And as a reminder, this is an action item, and we are requesting that the board approve the proposed TAM FY 2021 annual budget pending completion of the 30-day comment period, which actually ends on June 28th, and accounting for the actions taken on the strategic plan revenues in item 8. And Lee and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Judy, it's Susan. I have a question. Judy, could I ask a question? Okay, I think you're muted.
I thought you heard me.
No worries. Okay, sorry, I was waiting for you to say.
Okay, so.
So my question is, on one of the slides, looking at Measure AA funds, there was a line item for sea level rise, and it was $50,000, and that just seems exceedingly small, given the challenges that we have in the county around that issue. So I was wondering if that was kind of constrained by the Measure AA expenditure plan, and if we have other kind of broader categories that we can address our sea level rise issues in, and if somebody could just speak to that issue. Because that's the only, I may have missed it somewhere else in the budget, but that's the only place I saw it called out.
So, and if you want, I can start. So you're definitely right. So it is a very small amount. It's a seed money for the sea level rise issue. And I believe it's only 0.5% of the total revenue received annually. And, you know, the hope is really we can use that as a seed money and then track other grants to help us really address the issue, make some difference. So in our upcoming work plan, so one item is to actually start the, I guess, design and development of that program. So, and, you know, I will let you add any.
Sure. So Commissioner, yeah, I mean, we know that the needs in terms of sea level rise, planning and capital needs is much, much greater than the funding that we have available in this program. I think the intent of this program is to provide seed money to perhaps do some early stage planning. It's really not enough money to do capital improvements. So in order to accomplish those, we would need to either build them into other projects, for example, State Route 37 work that's ongoing, or work in partnership with other entities to pursue funding of an adequate scale to really accomplish the kinds of improvements that may be needed.
Okay, thank you. I mean, even for planning, that seems like a very small amount. So I would just urge staff to be looking out for more opportunities, because if we don't start planning and obtaining infrastructure money for this issue, we're going to have a really large transportation problem soon.
Absolutely, we agree with that. And I would also just like to point out that we are working in close partnership with county staff who, through the Baywave program, have been doing really excellent analytical work in this area, and we hope to be able to continue that partnership and leverage the funding through that as well.
Great, okay. All right, more questions. Yes, Commissioner Bryce.
Hi there. I wasn't going to ask about this, but thank you, Commissioner Susan, for having raised this. I actually, it feels funny to me, a $50,000 budget line item in a vacuum. So I'm glad you mentioned that you're working with the county, but almost all of a lot of the infrastructure that's going to be impacted by sea level rise is actually involves other jurisdictions. So I don't need to hear more right now about how TAM involves itself in the broader discussion around how sea level rise is impacting our transportation infrastructure, but I think it's important that we hear that. It would feel funny to me to have TAM sort of going out on its own, even with a teeny bit of money, without, it's such a big discussion, and we really need to be jumping in with the other agencies, jurisdictions together. And I would like to understand our role in that. And I'm glad that's there. I'm not sure what $50,000 does or what that means to how it's applied to our staff or resources, but anyway.
And if I might suggest, and I'm sure you've thought of this because you are working with the county and Baywave, if Chris Chu and Tom, who's developing the software application to analyze the nexus between transportation and sea level rise, could make a presentation to the TAM board about the work that he's doing, I think that would be very helpful, because it does have implications for all of our transportation network.
Great.
Absolutely. We'd be
do
happy
that.
to bring back more information on those efforts, and how, there are definitely many efforts happening throughout the county and the region and even the state related to sea level rise. And so we'd be quite pleased to bring back a more in-depth presentation on that.
And I would just add, I think one of the things that I've been looking for on the transportation side in terms of infrastructure, the sea level rise impact on transportation infrastructure, is not only identifying what infrastructure is going to be at risk and trying to figure out when, but then that prioritization of how we address things. And we've been doing one-offs in terms of dealing with sea level rise. I mean, just even thinking about them. And I think I would love to see TAM be asking for, demanding to other stakeholders, really think about not only, so identify what's at risk, when it's going to be at risk, and have some planning around how we attack those risks in terms of the planning and investment in addressing them.
And that's part of the Baywave analysis too.
Exactly.
So I think we need a presentation.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Kate, I mean, we've both been involved in the Baywave process now for
a long time.
Just Kevin, for some long period of time, and we've been very active in identifying the challenges that we have to our transportation infrastructure. So coordinating all of our efforts together, both through the state, through the county, and through our local municipalities is something that I think we're all very cognizant of.
And just to
Can you
defend
send us the
myself,
name?
it's good that it's good that TAM is TAM needs to be part of that conversation. So I know the Bay Wave stuff is going on, but it's really important that actually TAM be more proactive on this and talking about it. So
Well, I agree. We need lots of money for 101, so that's fine.
Well, but there's also many board members at TAM who have not been involved in Bay Wave. And so I think the information sharing, and as Kevin noted, there is a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of information to share with the board.
Can you give us the name of the person you suggested come and give us
It's Chris Chu, who's working with
Chris.
a consultant.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Tom, whose last name I
Great.
can't remember. Maybe Kevin can.
No, but Chris is the person.
Yeah,
so I
right.
think she really needs to be out front on that.
Okay, who else has question or comment?
Chair Arnold,
Yes.
this is Mayor Pro Tem Pat Eklund. I had raised my hand, but I'm not sure you can.
I can't see it. So just.
Yeah, I know. It's
just
what else
just
to do because
come in.
I can't wave. I have not had the opportunity to listen or be privy to what was discussed at the executive committee on the budget. And I first of all want to thank the staff for doing a great job in really hooking the budget up with the strategic plan. I think that's a great connection there. But I can't let a budget just go by with the anticipated expenditure of over $17 million more than revenues without hearing that there's going to be some effort this next fiscal year, the next couple of months, especially if things don't pick up, that TAM staff might be looking at where we might be able to reduce some expenditures. So I didn't hear anything like that. And Anne, I was wondering, you must have talked about that at some point at the executive committee meeting or sometime. But if it looks like TAM's going to run out of the reserves, I know cities are not going to be in a position to bail TAM out because we're going to have a hard time bailing ourselves out. So have you thought or discussed about areas where you might be able to reduce other than crossing guards and safe routes, which are the two favorite programs of every elected official that serves in Marin?
So,
Commissioner, Anne Lee, hold on, I'll just say a word. So, I mean, we would certainly be happy to walk you through the budget in more detail at any time if you like, but I would just offer a couple of things. So one, yes, we have absolutely looked internally at how we can reduce expenses, and Lee mentioned some of those things on the operational side in terms of the lease and staff foregoing a COLA for the year. We have also, as you've heard tonight, looked at reserving, using some of the reserve, but in a judicious way to help offset any potential revenue losses due to economic forces. And then the last thing is something that Lee probably is jumping at the bit to talk about or to say again, is that, when we're talking about expenditures exceeding revenues, it's really because of the timing of the expenditures and the revenues. It's not because of a structural budget deficit. And so we start the year with a fund balance of funds that have accumulated over time, mostly due to just project cash flows occurring on a longer schedule than perhaps was anticipated. So we have a fund balance that is sufficient this year to cover the difference between those revenues and those expenditures. So we're not looking at a deficit situation. We're certainly not looking at the jurisdictions to bail us out. And we will continue to keep the board updated on actual revenues and expenses throughout the year.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes me feel a lot more comfortable knowing that you do have that substantial fund balance coming in. Thank you for sharing that.
Great. Sure.
Thank you. All right, who else has questions or comments?
I have a comment, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, both to Lee and Ann, I've continually been encouraging TAM to think about the presentation of the financials. And I think we continue to move in the direction. But I think as we heard from some of our EV advocates, some of the smaller programs could sort of use a bit more clarity about how the funds are used. And so I'd appreciate that continued effort as we move forward, and would always be happy to help. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. All right, anyone else?
Chair Arnold, it's Katie again. I just have one comment. I wanted to thank Lee and for the presentation. I appreciate it. I wanted to also just call out, I just really like the way that the work plan was presented, and slide 16 in particular. There was a bullet related to support for certain local agencies and grant seeking, et cetera. I think it's so critical that TAM use its resources to help our local jurisdictions, local agencies, as they go after some of the regional grant money for various programs, various projects. I'm thinking specifically, of course, around Air District programs. So much incentive money that's there that Marin doesn't end up taking advantage of. And I think in large part because our jurisdictions are smaller. A lot of these monies are used, are great grabs for school districts. We've got school districts though that are small. They don't have the expertise or the bandwidth to let alone go after a grant, but then manage it. And I think that TAM staff can play a really important role in supporting our local agencies, local school districts, what have you, and going after some of this grant money, and then actually helping sort of support administering those grants. I think it's key that the money's out there. We need to bring as much of it as possible back home, and I think TAM has the capacity and the bandwidth and the expertise to help these local agencies go after it, get it, keep it, administer it, so we don't lose it. So I just so glad that you have that articulated as part of the work plan, and appreciate having the work plan just generally presented as you did. And a lot of work ahead, but TAM can play a really important role in helping us all. So
Commissioner Lee, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so also thank you for the kind of strategic overview of this next year. One of the questions I had for you is, you said there was more coming up about the EV charging infrastructure, and I guess, is that to get a little more finite? I've seen a lot of articles shared recently about electrification of trucks in California and fleet. And so I'd really like to understand moving forward what that impact's going to be in ways that we can even, I think the target was set for 2035, but how we can do that sooner, or even if that's true, right? Part of it is I haven't seen all the metrics about what the state's really wanting to accomplish with that, and ultimately what opportunities Marin have in helping that. So as part of that, hopefully you'll be able to share that as well, if you planned on it. I don't know if that was the detail you'd referred to.
So Commissioner, I mean, we would certainly be happy to spend some time with you walking through the details of that program so far, and just in terms of what we plan to bring back to the board. We'll be coming back probably in the early fall with kind of proposals and discussion on what the program could look like for this coming fiscal year, what the priorities are, and what we will need in order to deliver the program.
Thank you.
Okay. Who else? All right, so are we ready? Oh,
Judy, if you need a motion, I'd be happy to make it. It's Kevin.
Thank you so much. I have first of all, let me just ask the clerk, there's no one from the public here yet at all, right?
Chair, actually we do. We have nothing in writing, but we do have a speaker who's viewing the meeting tonight, Carol Culloway, and I'm going to hopefully unmute her now. Carol, go ahead.
Hi, I actually wanted to speak on the next point, and I wasn't sure when I raise my hand or get in line, so I apologize.
So you're item number 10?
Yes.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
We'll circle back with you then. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Did you get that, clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Call the
Here
roll,
we go.
please.
Okay. Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Carmel, Commissioner Carmel.
Commissioner Carmel,
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Cleveland Knowles,
Yes.
Commissioner Colbert,
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Eklund,
Aye.
Commissioner Fredericks,
Yes.
Commissioner Haroff,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Rice,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodoni,
Yes.
Commissioner Sears,
Yes.
Chair Arnold.
aye.
That item passes unanimously.
All right. Okay, let us go down to number 10. And this is a discussion of COVID-19 effects on the transportation system and recovery planning. And I think Derek is on board to lead us through this. Yep, there he is.
Good evening, commissioners. Hope you are all doing well. And I'm starting to share my screen.
Okay.
So you should all be able to see my screen. Tonight we wanted to host a discussion on the transportation impacts from COVID-19 pandemic and shelter in place. We presented this item to the executive committee for input, reflective in this presentation, as well as the Citizens Oversight Committee this month for their input as well. Prior to the shelter in place and the pandemic, there was an ever-growing increase in traffic. Marin County historically has had predominantly drive-alone mode share, with a large in-commute from the East Bay and North Bay, with folks who live in the county, working within the county, or working in San Francisco. The vast majority of trips that do occur within our county are local trips, and we have very few pass-through trips. And TAM has been monitoring and growing our traffic monitoring and reporting over the last 5 years, and a lot of this information comes from our origin and destination study. However, what we are experiencing on our roadways currently is an entirely different picture. We are basically living through a scenario that was not anticipated by any transportation planner, and what that's resulting in some of the data that we've been monitoring is a rather rapid drop-off in vehicle miles traveled. This is one source of data, and we are investigating multiple sources of data to better assess the impacts from the current conditions on our traffic. We're going to continue our traffic monitoring and reporting efforts through this period, and make sure that we understand when traffic comes back, what that looks like, and how strongly it comes back on. However, during this time, we're seeing a really mixed bag of headlines and news stories, of good news and potentially problematic news for transportation, and for our communities. We wanted to have this discussion with you to best plan and prepare for what comes next. So we developed these 5 big questions, really to establish a framework for what TAM and Marin County public agencies should be considering as we do transportation planning. I'm going to talk about each of these in the upcoming slides, so I won't hit them here. But we really wanted to start with who is most impacted. The impacts we are all feeling. I don't think a single person is immune from what has been going on in the world. And this is really just a snapshot of who may be impacted from COVID-19 and shelter in place. Really, we're focusing on the low-income transit-dependent folks, senior populations who are more at risk to the virus, as well as gig workers and independent contractors who have suffered through the economic shutdown. And then it's really important to note through this that teleworking has had negative impacts to those who can't work remotely, but it's been very beneficial to those who can. So we're keeping that in mind as we think about who is most impacted. We do have a lot to be thankful here in the county. We have had tremendous leadership from our elected officials in the Health and Human Services Department, Dr. Willis. We've also seen air quality improvements, improved travel conditions, and historically, compared to other counties, Marin County has had more resiliency in times of economic recession, for the most part, with some very poignant exceptions to that rule with communities such as Marin City and the Canal neighborhood. We also have to consider what constraints we face when we think about our path forward for recovery. We do have limited resources, both in terms of staffing and in terms of financials, as well as our constrained geography and street network. And we have a rather complex decision-making process that we all have to weave through during this process. The third question we asked ourselves is what changes with land use and employment, which are really the fundamental drivers of transportation, and what should we expect in these areas? Land use and housing is definitely more murky, and it's going to take a lot longer to really develop and think through what changes are going to happen on the residential side. But the employment side has really kicked into gear rather quickly, and we're seeing a lot more concrete changes within the employment world. But on the land use side, we are there is likely to be a change in occupancy rates. There's been a big conversation about density with the spread of the virus through New York City, which fortunately the San Francisco and the Bay Area region has avoided. So we're really targeting the concept of occupancy and reducing occupancy levels in an individual dwelling unit. We think access to services has a big role in the housing world, and making sure that people have access to essential stores such as grocery stores and medical facilities during this period. Senior housing and what the senior housing model looks like moving forward, whether or not we retain our sort of centralized nurse assisted living facilities or move more towards ADUs and JDUs, will have an impact on our land use fabrics. And it's also important to really note that we are tied to the San Francisco housing market. And as occupancy rates within the San Francisco market might change with multiple households within a single dwelling unit, whether or not that has an impact on the Marin housing market as well. Finally, our proximity to open space is really a large amenity that we have here in Marin County, and are seeing that as a marketed asset for a lot of real estate transactions currently. On the employment side, it's not unreasonable to expect a shift to on-demand and self-service retail models to remove essential workers from exposure and risk from transactions. We're also seeing the rise in the flexible office models with flexible office hours as well as remote work locations. And then finally, just our general retail and commercial spaces are changing with some pretty drastic changes at restaurants with when following the social distancing and health protocols, as well as auto dealers reconsidering their model for transactions with their customers. So what does this mean for mobility is the $50,000 question here. And this will vary by mode of travel, and some recovery will move faster than others. We are seeing an uptick in remote work and telecommuting. How long that might sustain itself is still unclear. We're also seeing a rise in active transportation and e-bike usage out in our communities, but we're seeing rather dramatic drop-offs in transit use. We're also seeing a really unstable micromobility market with an unknown impact on TNCs, which are ride-sharing companies such as Uber and Lyft, among many, many others. Ride-sharing, carpooling and van pooling specifically have dropped substantially, and what is looking to be the most likely scenario moving forward is the decline in transit use, and the decline in ride sharing is going to cause an increase in congestion levels beyond what we were experiencing prior to this period. So as TAM is looking at what changes we should be considering, we have already started with a number of changes. We've had a number of operational changes, including meetings such as this that are now online and not in person. We have been working with stimulus packages to make sure we have a ready-to-go list of Marin projects for any federal stimulus funding for the Bay region. But we're also revisiting our existing programs, looking at our ability to focus on equity, revisiting how we do our public outreach processes. What do our programs actually look like during this period with changes to programs such as Marin Commutes and crossing guards and safe routes to schools. And it also impacts things like our traffic monitoring and reporting. Staff has been monitoring and working with our transit agencies on the Transit Blue Ribbon Task Force. And we're really looking at changes to these programs that solve a problem that we're currently facing that we can afford and can adjust in the future. So what other changes are we considering? Upcoming discussions at the TAM board will include a quick build grant that really supports safe streets and street redesign efforts using our TAM innovation program. We're also looking to have a discussion about the HOV hours of operations. We think with the low volumes that are currently on our highway and the need to support our transit agency partners, this might be an opportune time to revisit the hours of operations to support regional commute service. We want to partner with our transit agencies on public safety campaigns to make sure that the public is aware when it is safe to take transit and what the proper safety protocols are for using transit. Additionally, we may need to look at transit incentives and technology that support transit ridership, as well as service redesign efforts and advocating for funding for transit partners. We will also be partnering and providing technical support for local jurisdictions and considering how we can best do that, especially with potential staff reductions at a lot of our local Department of Public Works. We have been partnering with Marin Economic Forum and looking to continue that conversation with new partnerships with the business community and supporting employers in the county, and then also considering the role of telecommuting within a lot of our programs and what we do as part of Marin Commutes. So with that, we are asking for a discussion tonight from our commissioners. Are these the right questions? Are we missing anything? Do these considerations and changes make sense? And then what do we need to implement them? What do we already have? And then just thinking through recovery, it might be slow, it might be fast, it might be multi-humped with a potential second wave or even a third wave. So how do we adjust in the face of all of this? With that, I am open to any questions or discussion that this board may have. And thank you for your time in this presentation tonight.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, who would like to start out with questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Carmel.
Yeah, hi, Derek. Thank you so much for your presentation, which was really very interesting. I think you're asking the right question, which is what we can do right now, because we're at just such a unique moment, and I'm sure all of you are feeling the same way that I am, which is that it's like drinking out of a fire hose. You're just trying to take advantage of the situation to get things done that you would otherwise not be able to get done because it's just so difficult to implement change. And the thing that comes up when I think about transportation that would significantly impact our community here, at least, is this north-south greenway. This is a lot of work has been going on this for a long time, and we have had a vexing problem here connecting Mill Valley over the hill into Corte Madera, as you probably are all aware. There's multiple routes that have been evaluated. There's one which has got some local support, but it's very expensive to do. And I think the time is now to kind of like strike this thing and get this thing done once and for all, and to come up with a solution which which we can agree on is most pragmatic, and to finally complete this route, because otherwise we'll never be able to get the southern part of Marin from Mill Valley to the south connected to the center part of Marin up to, for example, the Larkspur Ferry. And I'm just hoping that we can use this opportunity to kind of agree on which of these routes that we're going to take to get over this hill and put this discussion behind us and finally move forward with implementing this program, because people are seeing the benefit to alternative modes of transportation right now. And people are most likely to want to come up with a solution to this thing right now. And so this is kind of a unique opportunity to kind of really strike while people are really looking for a solution.
Hey, thank you. Who else? Yes, Commissioner. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you, Chair Arnold, and thank you to Commissioner Carmel for those thoughts. I think Sausalito is in a similar position with wanting to improve its bike accessibility and the North-South Greenway. So thank you for that. And I think that also raises, I think you raise a question which was asked, or was at least put on this, one of the slides as a constraint in Marin County, which is complex decision-making processes. And I agree that acting quickly, being nimble, and being able to do some pilots that could demonstrate to people how some of these slow streets or outdoor dining and more biking could be viable solutions going forward, not only for the COVID context, but that's the rationale, but how to carry those forward. So I think as many new pilots and programs that we can get started and get them started quickly before congestion really ramps back up, that we will be in a great position. So I want to thank Director Richmond for having a quick build program, and I'm not sure if that includes quick build bike infrastructure, but I think that would be great. So many more people are out on their bikes now that we really need to capture that and keep it feeling safe and a great way to travel. The other thing I really loved to see on one of the slides was the expansion of the HOV lanes, and I really see this as an equity issue. The people that are going to be taking the buses now are primarily our lower income communities and communities of concern, and the faster that we can get them from point A to point B on the bus, the better, so that they have less exposure to COVID. And so keeping our buses moving, I'm pretty sure that the congestion on 101 is going to come roaring back. And so having greater access to HOV lanes, I think, is a really important aspect. So I'd like to support that as a strategy. And other strategies to spread the AM and PM peak, other incentives, maybe perhaps working with the Golden Gate Bridge District on incentives at the toll, or other transportation demand management strategies that have been mentioned several times tonight to encourage people who can to continue to telecommute. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Hey, who else? We've heard at the county that we think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to telecommute that didn't before, just because of going through this, and that it really can be done and it can be productive. And so I think that's part of what we're going to see is a change in 9 to 5 every day of the week, but we'll see. Okay, who else? Yes, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are excellent comments from both Commissioner Carmel and Commissioner Cleveland Knowles in regards, but I'd like to bring it back to Commissioner Carmel's really pertinent point. Is now is really the time, just as in Creek Park, Brian Corbell worked to get the San Anselmo's Creek Park moving to a really satisfying place that people can really see and accept. There are myriad little fixes all over the place. North-South Greenway is a really important connection, and I completely agree that that is important to complete and figure out the connection over the hill. The east-west bikeway is the other axis of bicycle transportation in the county, and that's really, it's barely on the drawing board. I mean, it has been studied to 5% engineering, but however, there are a bunch of little pieces along the way that will make bike transportation on outside individuals riding their bikes much more efficient and much safer. And that will lead people, the time is now to support the public's move towards this alternate transportation mode. And I think that we've really got to act rapidly and in small and efficient ways that can really make a difference. I mean, we're helping business in our downtowns just with paint, you know, and changing the way people circulate as pedestrians. And I think that we can do that also with other low impact transportation forms such as bicycling. So I think the time is really now to embrace that, and we can get to a good place to head off the inevitable congestion that's coming down the road. So
thank you, John. Okay. Anyone else?
One more quick comment, Madam Chair.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, you know, I appreciate, you know, TAM's a big organization, so I think that the Quick Build program is an excellent opportunity. I would encourage staff to, you know, be as imaginative and as possible. And I would also like to just echo Supervisor Rice's comments. You know, TAM's ability might simply really be able to help the jurisdictions execute upon a lot of this stuff. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are opening. People have mentioned it before, a lot of opportunities during COVID that the community might not have embraced. So it's really an opportunity to pilot these things and use them as long-term changes. I, of course, would be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, the challenges in the east-west roadway, and certainly a floating bicycle ring, I think would be sort of a really great opportunity. But I want to recognize it's probably beyond the scope of the budget of the Quick Build program. So I'll just put that under the wishful thinking category. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
I just have one. I have one small addition.
Sure. Go ahead.
So it's really struck me watching the presentation that was kind of labeled a COVID recovery presentation, that there were a lot of equity strategies embedded in it. And I just feel that the COVID situation has become inextricably entangled in a positive way with racial justice, partially because of timing and where everyone is. And I would love to see our COVID recovery plan also have a strong equity and racial justice and equity lens, which it seems like staff is already applying, just to kind of recognize that and kind of carry it forward in a really strong way. Because I think with COVID recovery, we have this opportunity to reimagine certain things. We don't do that through the equity and racial justice lens as well, then we're just losing that opportunity. So I'd love to see us just think of it in that way.
Well said, and I know it is. I know that it's being considered a big part of what all the conversations have been from staff. Anyone else? I want to thank staff. I think really every presentation that they did tonight was excellent, and very believable, and interesting to understand even a lot of the figures. And so keep up the good work, and thank you, board. I think you grasp it. Your comments have been great, and we're moving along. So I think if there's no other questions.
Public?
Chair, we do have a couple of members of the public who would like to comment.
Oh, that's right. Terrell. Yeah, please go ahead.
Carol?
Hi, Terrell Kellaway, Executive Director for Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Thanks so much for letting me speak. I wanted to speak before this item came up, but as a bicycle advocacy person, I would have to say everything that was said here this evening just makes me so happy. And I just want to commend you all for your visionary leadership, especially around Quick Build. And I want to echo what some of the commissioners tonight have said, if not now, when, or now is the time. We can really think outside the box. There's an opportunity here for people to really see these things in action and then hopefully carry them into the future. So again, I want to thank you, and especially Director Richmond for her leadership around this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrell.
And we have one more guest speaker. It would be Cindy Winter. Cindy?
Hi,
Yes?
Cindy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right, I'm going to speak about e-bikes this evening because
Okay.
encouraging their use, and they have an important role to play in our transportation system. However, for e-bikes to assume that new role responsibly, the issue of insurance coverage must be addressed. I'm not speaking about manufacturers' warranties, but rather about third-party liability. Even the best of us can have one bad nanosecond. Suppose you're cycling along a path and a little kid wobbling on a baby bike swerves in front of you. He's knocked to the pavement. Maybe you think it wasn't your fault. No matter. If he's injured, a claim will be made. If you were riding an old-fashioned pedal bike, your homeowner's or renter's insurance would provide an attorney and liability cover. However, if you had been riding an e-bike, your insurance carrier will say that your homeowner's does not apply because it doesn't cover motorized vehicles, and why hadn't you bought their motorcycle policy? That, in insurance vernacular, is a policy for miscellaneous motor vehicles. It covers Harleys, jet skis, snowmobiles, ATVs, as well as e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards. For an e-bike, it costs roughly $250 for 6 months renewable. I had thought about buying an e-bike, but didn't because $500 annually for a motorcycle policy seemed exorbitant given the probable low loss experience for e-bikes. For the higher wattage e-bikes, sellers are required to advise buyers that their insurance may not provide coverage for accidents, and please contact your insurance agent or carrier. I reached out to my 2 agents. They both provided incorrect information. So what does this mean for TAM? Consider that e-bikes, whose numbers grow rapidly, are roughly twice as heavy as ordinary bikes. Thus, if an e-bike hits someone, it is more likely to cause injury. While there is no requirement that e-bike users carry liability insurance, those who have assets to protect, modest though they may be, should have reliable access to affordable cover without having to fight their homeowner's carrier. My research indicates such cover should be provided. See the appendix to my written submission. I've since revised it mostly for clarification. If interest in the revision is among the board, please contact me. End of comment. Thank you. And
Thank you, Cindy.
for the work on this agenda item.
Okay. Is there anyone else, Denise?
No, ma'am, that's it.
Okay. That's it, guys. We are adjourned, and thanks again.
Great, thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone.